Today's video is sponsored by Western Digital. If you're a fan of classic fantasy RPGs, you probably know the name Baldur's Gate. The original launched in 1998 as an open-world epic set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe where every choice you made mattered. It was a massive success and is often credited for revitalizing the CRPG genre. The game got a sequel a few years later, and those two titles are really what put their developer BioWare on the map. But all of that was a very long time ago. We all know how things have been going for BioWare recently, and Baldur's Gate 2 came out all the way back in September of 2000. Besides the release of an enhanced edition, the series has been pretty dormant for nearly 20 years, not giving much hope to fans of the franchise. But all of that is about to change. Baldur's Gate 3 is coming very soon, but this time, BioWare's not in the picture. The third installment of this classic RPG series is being made by Larian Studios. They have a long history of making fantasy role-playing games. Their most recent titles, Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, are both highly acclaimed from critics and users alike. So a few years ago, when they reached out to Wizards of the Coast, they got permission to take a crack at the next Baldur's Gate. I would say the anticipation for this game is pretty high, and so far, from what we've seen, it's looking pretty great. So I want to cover some of the basics, go over everything we know about the game so far, as there's going to be a playable version of it in early access very, very soon. But first, I want to take a quick word from today's sponsor, Western Digital. Recently, they sent me this. It's their WD Black SN750 NVMe SSD. It's part of their WD Black line of fast computing storage for gamers. Basically, it's a really fast SSD. This can be helpful for cutting down on load times in games or even just the time it takes to boot up your system. It can also help to avoid any potential stalling that could interrupt competitive play, streaming, or VR experiences, and it's particularly helpful if you multitask often, which I do. A lot of times I'll be editing a video, have like 10 tabs open on my web browser, my audio and image software is running, and I'll need to transfer massive files that exceed 100 gigs. So a fast drive like this is very helpful. So yeah, the WD Black SN750 NVMe SSD, it's not only a mouthful, it can help you deal with the higher performance demands and larger file sizes of modern day PC gaming. And if you're like me and you do any sort of editing work or just multitasking in general, it's good for that too. So if you want to learn more, go ahead and check out that link in the description below. But yeah, let's talk some more about Baldur's Gate 3, shall we? So they're calling this game a next generation RPG. Really, it's more of a fresh modern take on classic RPGs. If you've played any of Larian Studios' recent games, you'll know that they've got a knack for building these super in-depth, immersive, interactable worlds with lots of lore, variety, ways to play, and characters to discover. Now, those are some of the reasons the Divinity series became so popular, and it looks like they're taking all of those elements and more into Baldur's Gate 3. Of course, the game is set in the Forgotten Realms, where you must gather a party and embark on what they are calling a tale of friendship and betrayal, sacrifice and survival, and the lore of absolute power. This Mind Flayer parasite has been planted in your brain, which is terrible, yes, but also awakened these mysterious otherworldly abilities. So you have the choice of resisting and turning darkness against itself, or embracing the corruption to become the ultimate evil. And basically, the entire game revolves around this premise. Do you use the brainworm powers or not? Now, it wouldn't be a classic RPG if it didn't begin with you building a character with plenty of customization, and Baldur's Gate 3 starts off with you doing just that. Pulling straight from D&D lore, you get to pick your gender, background, race, and class. The background is basically your character's personality and history. For example, you could be a charlatan, this connoisseur of underhanded deals, or an entertainer who lives to sway and subvert their audience. There's many background options, all of which come directly from classic D&D character building. For races in the game, they've got tiefling, drow, human, githyanki, dwarf, elf, half-drow, and halfling. Some of the races have sub-races for you to pick from as well, and beyond, of course, changing your appearance, race choice features bonuses to certain stats, resistances, unique masteries, and abilities. There are also classes to pick from. There is the wizard, cleric, fighter, ranger, rogue, and warlock. Each of these have their own unique blend of actions, cantrips, and spells that you get access to. You get to pick your ability points, choosing between strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, and you can also pick from a range of skills that you want your character to be proficient in. Now, if you don't feel like building your very own character, you can also pick from one of the handcrafted origin characters. There's going to be 5 at the start. There's Lysiel the fighter, Gale the wizard, Shadowheart a dark cleric, Will the warlock, and Asterion the rogue. Now these origin characters will offer these handcrafted experiences. They each have their own unique traits, skills, and stories that will actually intersect directly with the narrative of the game. Now all of these classes, races, and origin characters that I just mentioned will be included when the game comes to early access, and they will be adding more as they move closer to completing the game in the coming year. Now they've called this, in a lot of their discussion, a next generation RPG. The game is being built on the new Divinity 4.0 engine, and they say that this gives it this unprecedented freedom for you to explore, experiment, and interact with the world. So I want to take you through the process of the beginning of the game, which we've seen a few different gameplay highlights from the developer so far. This hopefully will give you basically a good overview of everything the game kind of has to offer. So after you build and select your character, the game starts off with you being abducted by this massive flying tentacle mind flayer ship, and then you are infected with a brain warping tadpole. Pretty terrible start to your adventure. In the tutorial, what actually happens is you break free and then find yourself on the Sword Coast about 200 miles east of Baldur's Gate, and this is where the adventure begins. So the game does have a traditional top-down perspective that was used in the classic CRPGs. On top of that, though, you will have the ability to play in third person if you're looking to get kind of a closer look at the action. Combat in the game revolves around this turn-based mode that follows the D&D 5e rule set. This includes things like team-based initiative, advantage, disadvantage, and roll modifiers combined with combat cameras, expanded environmental interactions, and a new fluidity in combat that they are promising rewards strategy and foresight. The game also has a stealth system where you can sneak in the shadows, making you less detectable. And while sneaking, you're also able to see enemy vision cones. This will let you bypass encounters or just get the jump on your opposition. When you do enter combat, the game is automatically paused, and then the attack and move order is decided based on initiative, because again, this is a turn-based combat mode. You get to choose when and where to move your characters, cast spells, and attack the enemy. All of the combat is decided through dice rolls, and these are converted into percentages to give you a quick look at your odds of success. But if you do want, you can actually dive in a little deeper and see how those calculations get made. The combat is also, from everything we've seen so far, clearly very tough. This is a turn-based game with dice rolls, and if you've played this type of game in the past, you'll know that that can go really, really badly. In the 1 hour long gameplay demo that initially came out, the developer died in the game's very first post-tutorial encounter. And this is a person who knows the game pretty much inside and out. They know all the systems, mechanics, all the different abilities at their disposal, but just with a couple of bad dice rolls, basically things can go very south very quickly. And now, beyond being difficult, it also seems very deep and complex. Even in this early game footage, it looks like you've got loads of different attacks, abilities, and skills at your disposal. There's also this player-initiated turn-based mode that will let you pause the world around you at any time, even outside of combat. So you could use this to do things like prep for an encounter before it begins, or pull off a heist, sneaking into a building and stealing something with pinpoint precision, or escape what looks to be an upcoming trap. Now, it also wouldn't be a classic RPG if there wasn't customization, and there will be in this game. It's a full loot RPG. You'll be finding all sorts of gear and weapons and accessories to equip to your characters, yourself, and your companions. Every single character even has their own inventory and weight limits, along with a stat page showing some basic information about their attack, defense, and movement capabilities. And maybe most importantly of all, equipping new gear and weapons actually change the way your character looks. It seems like it goes without saying, but I've played so many RPGs where you would put on gear and the visualizations of your character wouldn't change. What the hell are those people thinking? So I'm glad they're really, this is a loot game where the loot makes you look like you're wearing the loot. Great. Also wanted to quickly touch on some of the variety of abilities that we've seen in the gameplay so far. Some of this stuff just looks pretty cool. Like there's the mage hand, which is this phantom hand that lets you move objects or punt things across the map. Shield of Faith, granting this temporary bonus to defensive, and I just think this thing has a badass looking animation. Or a guiding bolt, which will deal damage and grant advantage on next attacks. The characters have these leap abilities that allow you to travel a short distance quickly. Of course, there's all sorts of like fireballs and lightning spells and stuff like that too. Yeah, man, it's a freaking RPG with spells and shit, and I like that kind of thing. Now, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about interactivity, because that's going to be a big part of this game, as it has been for prior Larian games. The world is just going to be full of different objects and things to interact with and do. So you can dip your weapon into elements like fire to enhance them. You could shoot at explosive barrels. You can throw crates. You can knock down piles of debris or rocks. You'll find all sorts of boxes, chests, and bodies that you can interact with and loot. All sorts of different consumables, potions, and scrolls to collect. There'll be books and letters to read if you really want to dive deep into the story. Elements will be interacting like you may expect. Like you can turn a puddle into a deadly trap by zapping it with lightning, or throw a fire spell onto oil to set it ablaze. This is what Larian has done very successfully in the Divinity Original Sin series, and that will be happening here as well. They really like to have this crazy level of interaction between you, the elements, the spells, your characters, the world, and also, like prior Larian games, you can pick up and move things in the environment. Like you can stack boxes to make a staircase, giving you access to previously unreachable areas. In fact, verticality in general is going to be a big part of this game. Much of the world is made up of numerous vertical tiers, and this will allow you to climb up on ledges to open up hidden chests or jump on top of a group of enemies. In fact, in the intro gameplay they showed us, there was this area where you started off by the beach, and then you wrapped around this windy hill infested with these mine things, up this ramp into this abandoned ruin areas, and all of this was one seamlessly connected location, and with the right abilities, you can move quickly between the high and the low ground, or I would assume vice versa. Let's talk a little bit as well about the storytelling in this game. Obviously, story is a big thing in Baldur's Gate. So the main storyline that you follow with you and all of the origin characters is going to be pretty lengthy. The initial installment we're getting is going to be over 20 hours, they've said, and this is going to include plenty of cutscenes and cinematics. And beyond that, the world will be full of different side stories and other mysteries to uncover, and all of the dialogue, they've said, has been voice and performance captured. Also, many NPCs you encounter are going to have a wide array of things to tell you and questions you can ask them. Sometimes this may lead you to a new quest. Other times, it could just teach you more about the world. There will also be many unique dialogue options dependent on your character. Like, for example, if you're playing as a vampire, looking at humans may remind you of your thirst for blood. Some of the dialogue options will involve ability checks. This is pretty classic D&D stuff. There will be dice rolls on things like persuasion or deception that will determine your success in the conversation. And like prior Baldur's Gate and Larian Studios games, they look to allow you to really have an impact on the characters and the world around you. Relationships will change and different things will open up or shutter depending on what you say and how you respond. I also want to briefly mention we got a glimpse at what they're calling a camp system. This looks to act as a place for you to rest and heal up your characters. It's going to expand over time as you get more followers to join you, and I guess a lot of the relationship building will happen here as you get a lot of options to chat with your various companions. And it also looks like the camping system is going to be an integral part to progressing key points of the story. And as I mentioned earlier, the game will have multiplayer. Like, yes, you'll have your character, you'll find party members, but you can also just play with other people. There's up to 4 players in multiplayer. Now, I have to say here, this game is not done. Baldur's Gate 3 is launching into early access on October the 6th, so you should not get this if you're looking for a finished, completely polished experience. There will be bugs, and this also is not the entire game. As of now, Act 1 is complete and will be fully playable in the early access version, while Acts 2 and 3 are still a work in progress. They are predicting that it's going to be in early access for at least 1 year, and beyond adding the remaining acts, they also also plan to add many improvements, features, as well as the new classes and races to the game. That said though, this does seem to be a lot. To quote the early access page here, they say this version of Baldur's Gate 3 includes Act 1 of the game, which in one playthrough is approximately 25 hours of self-contained content. And they say here that they've worked hard to release an early access version that feels complete, fun to play, and has as little unfinished content as possible. There are bugs and there will be changes to the content, but their goal is to already give you something that's genuinely fun to play. The more that I've seen about Baldur's Gate 3, the more interested I have become, and I think I'm going to be jumping into this game when it comes into early access next week. But just know it's not complete. Yes, there's 25 hours of content. Yes, they're going to be releasing it as polished as possible. But if you want to play the full game in its entirety, you're going to have to wait at least probably another year. But there you go. That's Baldur's Gate 3, everything that we know and what you should know before you check it out when it releases in early access. And I'm going to check it out most likely. And if I play it enough, I might actually come out with a follow-up video, maybe giving some impressions or a review of sorts. We'll see. But there you go, Baldur's Gate 3. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoy it. I'm excited to check this thing out. And yeah, stay tuned for more coverage. Okay? I'll see you guys later. Take it easy.